Shannon, this is Stacy, the one who you interviewed for The Doors That Don't Open. And I see you did an episode on Hatman. And I wanted to tell you that when I was in about sixth grade, I want to say, maybe fifth grade, sixth grade, there was a shadow guy in a long coat with a hat on, and I couldn't see any facial features. He was just black, that I would see in my room often. And one day it came to a pivotal point because he walked over to my bed, and when he got on top of me, he looked like a jaguar, and I woke up with 3 marks on my thigh, but I'm not uncertain that I didn't use my own fingernails to scratch myself. But then I was telling my mom to remember, I was reminding my mom about that, and then she reminded me of a story of being about 6 years old at my aunt and uncle's house in Downers Grove, and there was like a family reunion party, and her cousin went into a bedroom, 2 twin beds, and went to sleep early because they were tired. And when they were sleeping, she heard someone come into the room, and it was a shadow man, and he came up and he had a big top hat, and it was all black. No, she couldn't see any facial features. She doesn't remember if there was a coat, but it was just a black figure with a big top hat. And he came over to Raymond, her cousin, and lit a match and put it to his face. And then he made a gesture like that wasn't the right person. And then he took that match and walked it over did he light another match or? I think it was the same match, and put it to my mom's face. And then he put his hands around her neck, and she wiggled out and ran out of the room. So I just wanted to share that with you because I didn't realize my mom had a Hatman experience like I did. And you were just talking about it. Okay, thanks, Shannon.
Your alternative talk radio contact, The Planet, KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacency, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. My name is Shannon LeGros. Wanted to say a thank you to Stacy from episode 225 for calling the ITF hotline and leaving she and her mother's Hatman experiences. If you have a short encounter you'd like to share, leave it anytime by calling 702-291-8557. And Jeff and I see you guys out there reading both Beyond the Fray Paramalgamation, our newest release, and Beyond the Fray Bigfoot. So, please leave a rating and review when you're finished. You can find both books on Amazon in both ebook and paperback versions, and there is even an audiobook version for Beyond the Fray Bigfoot. Signed and personalized copies can be yours by going to beyondthefraypublishing.com. $19.99 with free shipping in the U.S. only. Beyond the Fray Bigfoot 2 is in the works, so email me at shannon@intothefrayradio.com if you'd like your encounters to be included. Keep up with both Into the Fray and Beyond the Fray Publishing on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with nothing left on the laundry list this week, let's get to my chat with Mike. I mean, something that I like to start off with for anybody that comes on the show would be, how did you even get into this? Why are we sitting here talking about this, and why is it even on your radar?
Sure. So, as a family growing up, I come from a huge family, big family, and like a lot of kids growing up, and loved hearing the little ghost stories, like getting scared a little bit until it was, bedtime. And then you're full of regrets when you're asking for ghost stories or scary stories from other people.
Yep.
Right. So it was kind of a cross section of, we loved doing, we were outdoors all the time. And that's, sort of a lot of people that grew up in kind of humble circumstances, vacation is camping basically a lot of times. So we spent a ton of times outdoors. So we had ample times to kind of talk through some of those stories. My parents didn't tell us a whole lot. They were pretty reserved, but as I was a Boy Scout, and in Scouts, you're always hunting for the stories. So as a kid, there was something about that stuff that always interested me. When I was in elementary school and junior high and everything, I would gravitate towards some of the more imaginative, I guess you could call it, subjects. So like some of the unexplained phenomenon and certainly, things that they weren't necessarily calling, or I wasn't calling cryptids or paranormal. It was just, ghosts
Right.
and Nessie and Bigfoot and, all those things were always very interesting to me, that there was stuff beyond. And I think part of that tied into, my whole growing up years. I thought I was going to grow up to be a zoologist. So I was always studying animals, in the old days when all of us had 3 channels to watch. It was a lot of, your Marty Stauffer's Wild America and stuff like that too. So there was a lot of this cross section of the wild and some of those, behaviors of different animals and predator and prey. I think those little things kind of tied into the fascination too of some of these scarier things, and so it was just, I always kind of had an interest in that, I don't know, in that side of the universe, if you will, just of these unexplained things. And then we had some weird stuff happen when I was not too extreme, certainly a few instances that were weird and inexplicable. So, and I can go into those if you want me to. And
yeah, absolutely. Because I know that we've got some Sasquatch stuff to talk about, which, as you know, is some of my favorite to cover. And we're going to save that for last. But you did also mention, like you said, when you were younger, you guys were doing some renovations on a home. And I'm assuming this was in Arizona, correct? You guys then, so did the activity start after the renovations began, or it was kind of already something going on? And around how old were you when this was happening?
So the first stuff I'll touch on, I was probably 8-ish, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And yeah, so we were on the edge, the very kind of northern edge of Mesa, Arizona, which back then, I mean, it's all blown up now, but back then that put us up against kind of the river and one of the Indian reservations, right? So there's plenty of those to choose from here in Arizona. And I only say that because that put us at the proximity, is we were definitely in the outskirts of the Phoenix area, but kind of at the edge at the time of what is one of the largest cities in Arizona. And we had a kind of a smaller house. Like I said, a whole bunch of kids. Growing up, we were all crammed into, multiple people sharing rooms and stuff. And I had 3 brothers. My youngest brother was too young to be out there, but my parents decided to do an addition to the house, just a kind of a rather large bedroom for kind of all the boys to share. And it was a pretty significant project. And I can't remember how long we had it. I thought we had it for, maybe a year or two, but after talking to my family, in the last few months ago, it was apparently we only had the thing for, I don't know, maybe 6-7 months, not quite a year anyway. And it was a small little travel trailer. It wasn't anything big. It had like a bunk bed on one end of it that my 2 older brothers slept on that side, and I'm and 5 feet away or 10 feet away at the most. I'm on a little bed that is made from a collapsible kind of a little table thing and benches, right? So it was just a little camping trailer. I don't know where my parents got it from. They don't even remember where they got it from because I asked them. And it was, it was at first it was kind of cool because it was like our own space. It was out of the house. It was just parked in the backyard. And
Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but real quick, was this like one of the C-Class that you could drive, or was this a tow behind, like a fifth wheel?
No, tow behind.
Okay.
Yeah, just a single axle, small, like something you see like a small SUV going around. It wasn't very big. Yeah, just a smaller, I don't know, it might have been 15 to 18 feet long. It wasn't anything big at all. And it wasn't moving. Like, it parked, it sat, and my parents got it. I don't know how they got it to us, but it just sat in the backyard until they got rid of it.
That would be cool as a kid, at least at first, right?
It was like we had the guest house.
Yeah, you have your own little
outside.
kids apartment. That's cool.
And since I was, as the 8-year-old, my other brothers were, getting a little older, so they didn't have as much interest with me and my imagination and playing with toys out there and stuff. So I spent a lot of time out there. And I don't remember anything, and maybe I will later in life, I don't remember anything distinctive happening. I wasn't out there ever really alone past dark. Maybe it was starting to get dark, but usually when we were all in there, we were going to bed. And one of the weird things that happened, and I can't remember, and I'm sure he'll even be listening, but I can't remember when they started, but my brother, who's just older than me, he would have night terrors and just wake up screaming like crazy, right? And it seemed like it started around the time that we moved out into the trailer. So we didn't ever have, we had a few maybe odd things, but nothing like heavy paranormal, or I don't think our house was haunted or anything like that. If it was, I was too young to really know about it. I have some older siblings that had some weird moments where they felt heavy with fear, but not, I'm just saying there wasn't some long history of stuff going on in the house, which is why I think I attribute some of this to the trailer showing up. I don't know if it was a haunted trailer or whatever. And we were pretty poor, so I'm sure my parents got it, for dirt cheap. So maybe it was cursed, and they got a deal. They got the cursed special on it.
You can always save a lot of money when something's cursed,
I mean, you can. Yeah, I agree. I think you could find some stuff. I don't know.
Keep that in mind, penny pinchers. Yeah.
That's right. I'll tell a little bit of what was going on with my oldest brother, who was aware of this, and I really wasn't. I was pretty oblivious. There's one specific thing I was very clear on, and a few kind of foggy memories, but ultimately what started happening. So my one brother, between myself and my oldest brother, he would have these occasional night terrors and wake up screaming, which would just freak the crap out of my oldest brother, right? Because he's waking up thinking one of us is getting murdered.
Yeah.
And having these night terrors, these real heavy nightmares that he couldn't really shake off. Like he'd look like he was awake, but he's staring off in the distance and just terrified. And it would be kind of this big ordeal. And, before long, the back porch light would turn on and my dad would come out to see what the commotion was and get things settled down. So I think that probably put my oldest brother on a little bit of a state of alert, or just some frazzled nerves a little bit. But my oldest brother, he started having experiences where something was coming to the trailer, and he could hear, or he could feel something kind of like it started off kind of subtly. It would shake the trailer, and ultimately it would start really shaking the trailer enough to, he was already kind of on a hair trigger, so he was already wide awake, and it was enough that it would wake up my older brother. I slept through most of those. I remember a couple times. But this was going on a lot. And the first thing he thinks of, so back in the day, behind our house, in the old neighborhoods and stuff like that, there was an actual alley, right? We used to use the aluminum garbage cans and put them back in the alley, and the garbage truck would come up behind the houses and do all that. So the first thought was somebody probably from the neighborhood is trying to come scare, one of his buddies or one of my older sister's friends or something like that was coming to scare my oldest brother. This was going on long enough that it started to increase, and it was at really crazy hours, 2, 3 in the morning. And it would get to where the trailer was shaking really, really heavily. And then it progressed to where he could hear the thing, whatever it was, climbing up the trailer. And those old trailers, old fiberglass or sheet metal or whatever they're made out of, you can kind of hear the roof, kind of see the roof and everything, and feel it kind of giving under the weight. So the thing had weight, because then the next thing he thought was maybe it was an animal that just happened to be, up on top of the trailer. But the thing, my parents had it parked, and it was on blocks or something like that. So it didn't shake very easily. It's pretty solid. anyway, so something started to crawl up there, and he could hear it, and then it would up on top started just shaking the trailer, just shaking us crazy, to the point where he would be awake while it was happening for several minutes. And after this going on for weeks and weeks, he starts getting up the courage to see if there's some way that he could put something on the top to not trap it, but to, some cans on a string or different things to detect it before it happens, or some kind of early warning system of, and nothing would ever work. Nothing that he ever tried of having a bunch of loose stuff up there. I don't know what else he tried to do, but nothing that would ever kind of show any evidence of it other than the thing happening. So that was pretty crazy, and it went on for a long time, and it absolutely terrified my brother. He's actually a doctor, but he says that's like he developed insomnia then, and it never kind of went away.
My gosh.
It really rattled him.
So
And he always felt very foreboding while it was going on too. Wow. It was always kind of a heavy, not just fear. The weird thing that I remember though that happened around that same time, I don't know, because I was the youngest, and if my dad, was coming to check on us late at night or something like that, we usually have the door locked to the trailer. And so, like, if my dad was coming to check on us, he'd knock till one of us would kind of wake up. And it was usually going to be me, because my little makeshift bed on the table thing was right by the little door. Mm-hmm. But we always had that thing closed and locked because my parents weren't insane. They knew that they needed to lock the door to a separate trailer out there that's, not far from an alley that people could come and go, if there's crazy people out there, I guess. But I remember waking up, and I want to say it was probably either early summer or late summer, because it wasn't scorching hot like it gets in Arizona, like you can appreciate up in Vegas. It was a very cool morning. And I remember that because I woke up to the door. The door would kind of it's like if you open the door, but you closed it without pushing it all the way closed. So pushing the little door jamb, whatever. But it was kind of clacking up against in the breeze. It was kind of blowing. And so I woke up to the tapping of the door, kind of tapping the door jamb with a little breeze in the morning. And I remember the feeling of kind of a cool breeze. And I remember it was just barely early light. I kind of sat up kind of confused what was going on. And I also remember feeling kind of strange, but the first thing I noticed when I kind of started to sit up a little bit is all over from let's say my chin down to maybe my stomach. I was wearing like a white pajama t-shirt or something like that, but I was covered in hair.
What?
Yeah. just there, like kind of like almost like hair clippings, but it didn't look like, I don't know, I was 8 or 9. I wasn't a forensic mind, but it almost looked like hair clippings or shed hair, right? Hair that had shed off of something that was all down my chest and my stomach, on my chin and everything. And the reason why I noticed it was on my chin, because my chin was kind of sticky, and I was reaching up, kind of touching my face and brushing a little bit of the hair off, but then there was blood all over my hand. And somehow in the middle of the night, and I think I've had 2 bloody noses in my life, and that was one of them. I had some really gnarly bloody nose that was all down my face and on my shirt. So as soon as I pulled my shirt down and saw blood on it, then I was really freaking out. And I'm covered in pretty dense hair. It's just super weird.
What the hell was that, Mike?
Just really weird.
Oh my goodness. Nope.
And yeah, it was kind of I think that was Nope Day for sure. But
yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, and the blood was pretty dry at that point. It was, like on my shirt and everything, it was kind of caked. So when I went in and kind of woke up my parents, and it's funny because my parents are getting old now, so they don't remember any of this stuff. They don't remember anything, any of these things, because we bring it up every now and again, and we're like, you can't remember any of that? And they're like, I don't remember any of it.
Oh, no.
And remember them being pretty, seeing me covered in blood and hair standing at their bed, and that's how they wake up. I'm sure they were pretty freaked out as a 9-year-old boy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the weirdest thing. And it seems like not long after that, my parents, we just about got done with the addition to the house, and as soon as we did, they got rid of that trailer. It was a kind of eyesore, killing the grass in the backyard and everything else. They got rid of that trailer. There was no use for it after that. They weren't going to tow it anywhere for camping or anything like that. So probably because it was just a weird kind of older 70s, little trailer. So
it is interesting though. I mean, you can't really, these are some of my favorite kind of stories. The ones that you just can't quite put your finger on and classify in the category. Like whatever was crawling on the trailer. What the heck was that?
Yeah.
What are there any ideas between you and your doctor brother that now he has insomnia from these incidents? Are there any guesses as to what that was?
We talked about that a lot. It ranges. It was way too big to be an animal, and while we were kind of at the edge of the town and desert, and it wasn't like there was any big enough animals out there that would have the weight to kind of, as the thing was crawling, he could hear and feel the weight of the thing. It felt like a man. But there was the neighbors at the time that lived next door to us. They were an older couple, and it wasn't them on the side that it was on. And on the other side was a single guy, a divorced guy, and he had a couple kids that were with him half the time. They were way too young to be doing any of that stuff, especially at that time. So there's a potential that it could have been somebody from the neighborhood just with a twisted sense of humor or something like that. But that would be really, really odd.
Yeah,
it would be a total stretch. I mean, it ended up being, we moved away from there because that area got kind of dicey later. So is it impossible that it was somebody that just every night that was their thing? Because it was very frequent and it went on consistently for probably a couple months. I mean, for a good while that we had that trailer. So that was, if it was somebody pulling a prank, that was somebody getting up every single night on some nights or many nights. So something, it just felt, and the fact that my brother could kind of feel it, it was almost like he would wake up right before it was happening. Like he could kind of feel something approaching. We haven't been able to land on any real theory other than just maybe some kind of weird, I don't know, could be a spirit thing, could be something paranormal. I think we lean more towards paranormal than, certainly wasn't any natural other than potentially a whacked out person, I guess.
Which is also equally terrifying, but it doesn't quite explain how he would be able to sense it before it ever got there. You don't usually hear of stuff like that when it's tied to another human being. Not impossible, but still very strange. Like you said, they'd have to be extremely committed. And it's so cool to hear about a trailer that, I mean, for lack of a better term, was haunted in one way or another. Like, that doesn't always mean ghost. It can just mean it's really got some messed up stuff attached to it. And obviously this one did. And I don't think I've ever quite heard a story like you just told about being covered in hair and then having this correlation of at some point during that night you had this massive bloody nose. Yeah, yep.
It was super weird. I mean, like I say, I think the only other time I've even had a bloody nose was after I got into like an accident out on a quad, and mashed up my face. So I wasn't prone to nose, and the fact that I was like in a lot of hair, like almost like somebody, like a barber had dumped his end of the day little dustpan full of hair on, which is disgusting. But
and that's the best way that you can describe it, is little like clippings. Like these weren't like with the roots attached and really long. They were just short little things.
Yeah, it was like, and it wasn't like if a cat had been on me and just left a little bit of hair behind. Mm-hmm. It was a ton of, like I had to, when I got out, I kind of caught it with my shirt, and I, even at a young age, I realized this is going to dump on the floor, so I caught it with my shirt and shook out my shirt. And when I finally went up to the trailer, there was still a whole bunch on my bed and around my pillow. It was all kind of around upper torso and my chin, my neck, all in that area. It was really strange.
And it was nowhere else in the trailer.
Nowhere else.
And and sorry, I interrupted you. And the fact that the door was kind of not locked, right? When you woke up, it was banging against the door jamb.
Not only not locked, it was cracked open, and Yeah, and that's what woke me up, was kind of the breeze coming in and hearing it kind of tap in the little morning breeze.
Oh, that's creepy, Mike. That one is really creepy.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I you know, as a kid, I didn't, I mean, kind of lock it away. I didn't,
Right.
but it wasn't something that it wasn't something that I thought about a lot. I probably thought more about what was going on with my brother than that. But yeah, it was pretty weird. Pretty weird, kind of inexplicable. A couple other little, again, we were in an area that started to kind of go downhill, and it really did once we moved away, which is kind of why my parents decided to move away. But that said, growing up, it was a relatively safe neighborhood. We didn't have there wasn't a whole lot of crazy stuff going on, but not outside of the realm of possibilities that, you know, you had some weird transient guy that just was how he was getting his jollies for a few months. But who knows? I can't explain hair unless he did a little back alley haircut.
Right.
And
just for the purposes of tormenting a bunch of kids.
And then punched me in the nose and dumped the clippings on me and called, you know, just.
But somehow you didn't wake
maybe
up.
That was it.
Very, very strange. I like that one. That one's creepy. That's on my no thanks list, though. And so nothing like that ever happened to you again? And obviously shortly thereafter you guys moved back into the house, which, by the way, when you went back to the house, did anything at all happen?
Nothing.
Wow.
In fact, some of the weird happened leading up. Once we did the addition, my parents literally added on to the house, so they weren't disturbing an old building. Plus, my parents bought that it was like a little HUD home that they bought, you know, when they were married. So nobody else had lived there before. So relatively speaking, it wasn't like a super old home. And it was kind of at the time in an expanding area of Mesa. So it wasn't like, I mean, the closest thing that we could have had that maybe had some ties to spiritual activity could have been potentially some Native American grounds.
Right.
We lived just about a mile away from some well-known burial grounds and those types of things, but nothing like, you know, we were on top of the Hopi Indian or the Hohokam Indian pet cemetery or anything like that at all. It was pretty benign, other than not anything else going on at all. After that, I don't remember a single thing of any kind happening.
Well, pet cemetery, there you go. There's the answer. I mean, Stephen King would know exactly what was going on with that trailer.
Right. Used for, who knows? Yep.
Yeah. Holy cow. I like that. Well, in a really creepy, horrible way. I like that.
Yep.
So before we get to some Squatch stuff, do you mind talking about you said there was a figure that was covered in gray or gray in color around the time of high school that you'd seen?
Yeah. So this is something that actually happened up in Cache Valley. So again, a kind of a funny tie-in. So, John, that you had on earlier talking about Bigfoot right by the golf course. So when we moved, we lived at the base of that same golf course. I don't know that has any tie into this particular thing, and I'm not saying anything related to Bigfoot on this particular deal. This would have been my senior year, kind of almost about 3/4 of the way through my senior year. I was kind of having some struggles with my parents, and I was going through kind of a weird time, and I was pretty depressed. I joined the military super young. I had already joined in high school, but I wasn't going to go to basic training till after I graduated. So I only give that context because I think I was definitely dealing with some depression on some stuff. Basically, I wasn't going to, if I didn't make some corrections, I got good grades and everything, but I kept cutting class because I would just get bored. I'd go be social, and I was graduating late if I didn't I had to pay a bunch of fees and all this other stuff too. And anyways, the long and short of it was I was just at kind of odds. I was a relatively good kid, but I was kind of always hatching plans and just always was up to something. And I was butting heads a lot with my parents at the time and kind of facing, into high school and getting ready to go off to boot camp and do all this other stuff. But in the house that we lived in up there, my room was in the basement under the stairs, and the one little window access kind of led under the deck. So that room it was perfect for a teenager who loves to sleep until all hours, right? Because it was like a cave. It stayed good and dark. And in that room I had this alarm clock that I had every night. I would have to kind of dim it because it was so bright that if I didn't dim it, like it was just too bright to sleep. And I remember, I don't remember what happened other than I remember one random night waking up and realizing, kind of my eyes opening and realizing that I hadn't turned off that dimmer. So it was kind of well illuminated in my room. And my head was kind of turned, and then I kind of dozed off, and I remember looking at the clock and all that stuff too, and it was 3:40 something. It was in the wee hours. But then I woke up to coming out of whatever dream I was coming out of. You know, you incorporate reality with the dream. I woke up to what I thought was my dad squeezing my foot, you know, as if maybe he was trying to wake me up and I wouldn't wake up, and he was coming in and twisting my toe to, you know, wake me up with a little bit of pain or something. That's what I thought, because it was very uncomfortable. And I opened my eyes, and right there at the foot of, not at the foot like directly below me, but to the foot and to the right, like to the right of the foot of my bed, but holding my foot, squeezing my foot, and kind of to the point where it was uncomfortable, was a figure. And it was not like just a blank spot of shadow. Like I could see some detail, but a lot of it was in shadow, so that the angle that it was at was kind of like that bright kind of clock radio thing I had, was to the side and slightly behind it, so it cast kind of a lot of shadow. So I couldn't see eyes. I could see hair. I could see like the front of the face till down to like the nose was completely in shadow. But I could see perfect outline of like kind of tousled hair. It was all very grayscale, like very kind of monochromatic. One kind of shade of gray, if you will, but I could still see detail. It had like a single piece thing it was wearing, whatever it was, almost like a jumpsuit, but a little bit more kind of form-fitting. Not like super form-fitting, but just looked a little bit more trimmed, and had kind of like a weird, I kind of realized after, like a weird sort of, I don't know if it was like a little cape kind of a thing, kind of hanging off one of the shoulders and kind of going halfway down the back. So it was just really odd. And it was male, I mean, from what I could tell. And what proceeded to happen, and at first I honestly think I'm dreaming. I think I'm one of those, you know, things where you think you're coming out of a dream to go into another dream or whatever. I think I'm dreaming, and I glance over at the clock without moving my head, you know, enough that I could see the numbers. And it was only like 5 or 6 minutes after that time that I woke up just before, right, when there was nothing going on. It was just a few minutes after. And the thing was sitting there, and it started to speak to me. And here's the thing, I don't, for the life of me, remember specifics of anything that it said in terms of the words it used or how the voice sounded, or if it was even speaking audibly. But I do remember it being a very, very condescending. It was a lot to do with how I was feeling at the time. You're worthless. You're a failure. You know, there's no hope for you. It was just absolutely, you know, speaking venom to me, you know. And I remember it being a male voice, but I couldn't sit here and describe like the tone of it or anything like that. I remember it being a very quiet, like almost like it was kind of speaking under its breath enough for me to hear it without it like actually talking directly to me, but it was clearly talking at me, kind of a deal, you know. I don't know if that makes sense, but the thing is that it was there for a long time, and I know that I wasn't dreaming because I never went back to sleep. Like I stayed awake, and once the very, very first light started to kind of peek through that little small window that was kind of sat under the deck, it was like I glanced up, like, and I'm talking maybe an hour and a half this had been going on, and I'm like wide awake, and I'm paralyzed with fear. Like it's easily the most scared I've ever been in my life, without question, hands down. Scariest thing ever. Most disturbing thing that ever happened to me. Made the trailer doesn't even come close to this situation, just because it was super heavy. It was dark, and I'm talking the feeling. It was super malevolent. It was like it was there trying, I don't know. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was demonic, paranormal, or whatever, but that one rattled me to the point where, as open as several of my family members are about talking through stuff, I've only told a couple people of that in my family, up until more recent years. I didn't talk about it back then. And like I say, it was kind of in the middle of stuff going on. And it was shortly after that I left, into high school, and I took off for basic training and was out of the house and doing all that stuff. So, but yeah, during that time, it was almost like probably the closest thing I could compare it to was like wearing almost like, this is really probably a crude comparison, but like a Star Trek looking kind of a jumpsuit thing. Mm-hmm. Like didn't look like it was tiny, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It almost looked like maybe it zipped up in the front, but it wasn't like mechanic coveralls or something like that either. It was like a fitted kind of a one like single suit thing. The thing looked like it was kind of well, I don't know that I was really thinking that at the time, but it wasn't like it was some shaggy, raggedy, clothes wearing, old timey anything. It was just, it was like what I've heard a lot of other people describe in many ways, what like when they've seen a shadow figure, or maybe a Hatman, or some of these other things that have kind of become more circulated out there on different podcasts and stories and stuff like that. But it just was a malevolent presence, and it rattled me to the point where, like, I remember that later that day, I went and talked to my dad about it. And we're a pretty religious family, and I had him. He came and he said he'd pray over the room and do all that stuff too. And it was like enough that it was like there was a bad spirit there. And again, for the longest time, I kept kind of beating myself up like it was a figment of my imagination, but it just wasn't. I never fell back asleep. Like I said, I was awake and I remember I was so drained that following day, I was worthless. It was like, I don't know if it was, I think it was going into like that might've been a Friday or something, or didn't have school, I don't think, the next day. I just remember being just sapped that whole day after that. Just felt weak, and just like I got no rest. Plus it sucked everything out of me.
So you watched that thing for about an hour and a half, you said?
At least, yeah.
And
yeah. I mean, it was. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. That's an eternity, by the way. To see something like that. Did you keep your eyes on it the whole time, since you did feel paralyzed, or were you trying to shut them because it was just so scary to look at?
No, in fact, yeah. I looked at, the only time I looked away was in the beginning when I looked at the time. And then when it dawned on me that there was finally some light coming through the window, and when I looked up, so if I'm looking down towards my feet and slightly to the right where this thing was standing, like right parallel to my feet, almost like its hand was just down to its side, resting on my foot, and he's just squeezing my toes. Almost like, like trying to make it uncomfortable.
And did it continue to squeeze your foot the entire time?
Yeah.
Wow.
I felt that pressure the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, it was really weird. And then the little tiny, it was like a half window because it was down in the basement. The little window was up to my upper left. And so the funny thing is while this thing is right in front of me, clearly it sees me, it's interacting with me, it's engaged with me, everything else. But as it's there, like I was still so paralyzed with fear that I was still scared to even blink. Like I remember like consciously my eyes drying out, and being like, I got to blink, but I don't want to, like, as if I was going to give myself away or something. I don't know. Like I was hiding or something, and any motion was going to draw more attention to me. But my eyes were fixed on this thing, and the only time that I can recall looking away, like I say, it was right when it began. I'm waking up to whatever's happening, and there's the clock. I'm looking at the clock, and then I was just fixed on this thing. And while it felt like 10 days. I mean, it felt like an eternity. It was like all of a sudden I noticed that there was a little bit of light coming in on that window under the deck. And as soon as I looked back, like as soon as I looked up and looked back, it was gone. Like in an instant, like I looked away and that was it. That's when it left. Like I felt my feet felt back to normal, and my feet were tingling. Like just that part of my feet felt like they had fallen asleep. At my toes, because they were like, it had lost circulation. Like if somebody had squeezed your hand, really uncomfortable, and your knuckles were kind of grinding a little bit.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt like.
Did it leave any marks at all? Any physical marks down there on your feet?
Not if it did, I wasn't looking at it. I remember looking at my feet later or whatever, but there was no like lingering effect, and I didn't see anything. Or
did it talk to you the whole time, saying these vile, things that was just trying to get you to be bothered by it so much? I mean, did it talk to you the entire time?
Yeah, I mean, it would go on for a long time, and just kind of like the muttering, just kind of like, you're just worthless. You got no hope. It was just kind of this muttery kind of a thing, and then it would stop. Like, and it's funny because I could not see the outline of where eyes would be, because everything from kind of like the bottom of the nose up, or from the top, like right at the bridge of the nose up, was in shadow. But it was like I could just feel it. I could still feel it like breaking into, just like it was just staring, soul kind of a thing. The only other thing weird that I can attribute to that at the same time was in high school, and I don't know if this happened with you. It seemed like this happened with a few other people, but there was a few required readings that we had. And there was a couple of books written by anonymous that were kind of going around at the time. And I remember hearing about them before having the class where I don't even remember what class it was, but there's a book called Go Ask Alice. And then there was a book called Jay's Journal. And they were both supposedly anonymous accounts of I think Go Ask Alice was like an anonymous kind of journal, essentially, of a girl's experience getting crazy into drugs and becoming an addict and doing all this other stuff. And Jay's Journal was very similar. I think it was kind of the same, I don't know, editor or whoever put them together. You could probably look them up. I haven't looked them up since. But the Jay's Journal was pretty disturbing. It was a guy that got into like devil worship and some other stuff too. And again, I don't remember why it was required reading of all things, but I think it was something to do with, trying to scared straight some kids or something like that. And
right.
I happened to read both of them, but I remember the Jay's Journal thing was a very disturbing book, with some of the pacts that they would do and just some of the things that would take place. And it wasn't super long or anything like that. But I remember thinking a lot about that, even though that was probably a year before. It wasn't like something I was actively reading at the time, but I remember feeling a close association to some of what kind of took place. Now, mind you, I wasn't partying. I certainly wasn't worshiping any demons or devils, or I wasn't dabbling in anything. At most, I was butting heads with my parents and just, being a handful of teenagers. That's about it.
No pentagrams drawn in goat's blood on the floor or nothing like that, huh?
Wasn't doing a lot of slaughtering of lambs or anything.
Right.
I think because a lot of that stuff gets associated with, if you're in a bad emotional state, subsequently, as I learned later in life, that some people can kind of manifest some of those things. And I was really in a kind of a depressed state. I mean, as much as a teenager could. But I was kind of in a bad place. I was in transition between some friends and some stuff like that I largely kind of to my own doing, and some other stuff too. But it was all kind of in that same period of time. So I think that I was probably more in a vulnerable state than I normally was, and I was already kind of thinking a lot of those things. So it was like thinking a lot of that self-loathing kind of stuff that people have depression can appreciate, magnified by 1,000 with this thing. It was like that was there just to needle me with that kind of stuff. It was pretty crazy.
Don't you wonder if your conscious and your subconscious mixed together to create some kind of a super dark tulpa that just was, like you said, reiterating things that you had been thinking and trying to fight off, Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I still don't. It's kind of like the trailer thing where I don't know how to classify it. I don't
Yeah.
know what to attribute it to. I don't know the closest thing. Like I don't know. I guess I'm fairly well versed in kind of some of the paranormal things, just because it became an interest, later in life because of weird things happening that I started to look. And part of it was because that stuff did freak me out so much that I really wanted to understand it. Like I really wanted to, I would read, I don't know, I'd do research. That sounds too formal, but I was definitely trying to verse myself in some of those things. So that being said, I don't know all the, some demonologists could probably sit here and tell me like, well, it wasn't a demon because these things have to happen
Right.
for that. I don't know that, or if it was, I don't know what it was, but it was dark. It was very, very malevolent. And it was like there just to make me feel not scared to the point where I couldn't shake myself out of it, and I had to just bear it. So it scared me enough to paralyze me. And after the fact, it really did scare me at a disturbing level. But the sensation that was the most overwhelming while it was all going on was just that heavy, just sorrow, depression times 1,000, kind of just, you're going nowhere, you're worthless, everybody hates you, it was just that kind of stuff.
Do you
Pretty
think,
crazy.
and this is a really, dark thing to ask, but it just came into my mind. Do you think that, the people that are really truly depressed or maybe even considering suicide, do you think that something like this, if it showed themselves to someone in that state, that that might be a catalyst, and then they're like, okay, yeah, I was thinking about doing this, so let's just end this whole thing. And that's a really dark thing to think about, but I mean...
You're dead. You're absolutely right on. That's exactly how I felt. I felt that the purpose, I guess, of it was to try to push me over the edge, for sure. Like that was supposed to be something that was supposed to kind of kick me out if I was sitting on the fence for that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And I was depressed, so those things were definitely entering my mind for sure. But if that was the case, that was supposed to be the thing to push me off the edge.
That's
Definitely.
That's horrible. And of course they're not around to talk about it if they obviously, went that way. These things are just, seems like there's nothing darker. They have no empathy, no sympathy. I don't even know what these things are, but why do they even care about someone being around or not around? You know what I mean? Like it just seems like that's their sole purpose. That is the only thing they're put in a room to do.
Well, I agree, and I think that the reason why I also think that I lean more something in that realm versus, let's say, a spirit, right? So if a spirit from a paranormal kind of standpoint or a paranormal logic standpoint is some kind of a disembodied soul, right? That either used to exist or and is lingering. But if there's this other category, this thing was not just not human. Like it wasn't like a human spirit either. There was something physical. I definitely had physical sensation, but it was not, the proportions of it were just like, I wouldn't say cartoonish, but just unhuman enough.
Right.
That it was almost a caricature of a person, sort of. Like it wasn't cartoony per se, but it was like the head shape was a little bit too angular.
Just
the hair was
off.
a little bit too kind of like kind of spiky. It was kind of the way it was dressed. It didn't fit in any kind of a box, and it didn't look like it. Like I didn't wake up and immediately think there's a guy there. I immediately was like, there's a thing there. It was definitely standing like a man and it had the same, I guess, kind of anatomical format, if you will. I mean, from what I could see, just standing there. But that's the other thing too. It was like the whole time it didn't gesture with its hands. It's like its fists were balled up at the side. On the other hand, that wasn't kind of on my foot. It was like it was clenching and tight. Just like the thing was just like simmering. Just kind of like just kind of only almost growly. It wasn't growling, but it just like I don't know how to describe it. I'm talking in circles here, but
that's all right. I mean, and don't you wonder if that thing was, was it manifested just for you, or if, or by you, however, you want to label that, if it came for you and it was made just for you, or if then the next night it goes to Bobby's house down the road because he's having a hard time with life and does the same thing to him. But would it look the same to Bobby down the road?
Like the nightmare fairy was making his rounds? No, I don't know. I felt it was expressly there. It wasn't, I happened to be the victim at the time of whatever this thing was. That thing came for me. 100%. Whether it was because negative energy I had in me kind of gave it some means of manifesting or whatever. I don't know. But yeah. And the thing was, it wasn't like I could see, I don't know. It was just, Shannon, it was weird. I was sitting there looking at this thing, and this stupid clock radio that I had was so bright. And if I didn't hit that dimmer, it was like 2 dimmer settings, right? It would literally wake me up because it was just a really kind of a bright blue kind of a light. It was just annoying, right? And I wanted my teenager cave, So I usually, before I'd go to bed, I'd hit the dimmer just for that reason. For whatever reason, I didn't that night. So it was plenty bright in my room. I could see, there was weird details I could see. And then there was other details that were obscured, like I could never see the eyes. I could see the mouth was just in a kind of like a half-cocked, real just grinny, evilly kind of a grin just while it was talking, just like it had a grin, like it was just enjoying watching me suffer, knowing that I was suffering. Like it was just getting a perverse joy out of it.
I mean, aren't you at least somewhat relieved that you couldn't see more of it? Or would you have liked to have at least been able to label some more of the eyes or the nose, what that looked like? I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to see more of that thing.
I'm fresh out of wanting more of that. No, I was good with the preview that I had, and that was because everything about it was just wrong, off, just malevolent, just evil, just dark.
So
yeah, I didn't need to see any more of that.
After that experience, though, did that help you to get you out of your funk a little bit?
No, well, sort of. I mean, it was kind of a short-term wake-up call. Things still kind of came to a head, but ultimately, what really shook me out of it was it was only a month or 2 before I left for basic training, and that was enough of. That's a wake-up call for anybody who has the privilege of that whole madness. So that things kind of they slowed down a little bit right before I left. I think just things kind of calmed down with my parents and stuff. It kind of came to a head. Like that wasn't like a light switch moment that changed everything, and I realized that
right.
Life is better than I necessarily. I think it actually kind of right until the end of the school year, which I think this was probably about a month before the school year was ending, I want to say, something like that. So things were still kind of on a downward spiral or so, but it kind of came to a head, and then I was leaving for basic training, and that was kind of the clean break.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That was, I mean, you kind of wrote a couple sentences about it in your email, but I didn't realize, that it was such a dark thing that came to you that night. So I am sorry about that. Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, I haven't told it a whole lot. I haven't, mainly because I haven't really wanted to think about it a whole lot.
I don't blame you.
A couple members. Yeah, but that's one that doesn't get broke out, during family gatherings.
Probably
or
not.
around the campfire.
No, I could see that. Yeah, no, I could see that totally. Well, with our remaining time, if you don't mind, let's talk a little Squatch stuff, shall we?
Do it.
Because just sticking around this same time frame, you did mention that you had some interesting late night vocalizations in the mountains around that time in high school at some point, right?
Yeah. So this particular town I lived in, Smithfield, there's a kind of a main canyon up there in Cache Valley. You've got a couple kind of primary canyons, these big canyons that are paved and you can drive up. Smithfield is not a very big canyon. It kind of you could go a ways up it, and then it turned to dirt road, and you can go a ways further before it, at that time, became like a Jeep trail, and ultimately you couldn't go any further. But you could, that whole area of mountains, up at the top, the ridges connect all the canyons together, right? So they connect down into some of these other canyons. Some of them were areas that John was talking to you about. Some of them, a couple canyons down, is where I had a separate experience a few years after. This one, this was my, I think it was my junior year, November of my junior year of high school, so 92-ish, somewhere in there, 93, somewhere in there. And a bunch of us, I remember, so, I mean, Utah can get pretty cold. Cache Valley is about 5 to 10 degrees colder than the rest of the main populated areas in Utah. It gets cold up there. And it was November. It was after, this is when all their hunting seasons are shut down and everything. It's like the snow, it's just before the snow starts to hit, just super cold nights down in the 20s. And, but for some reason, a bunch of us in high school, a group of friends, decided that we were going to rent a scary movie. Somebody had a generator and a big screen, and we were going to go up somewhere up Smithville Canyon that was big enough to kind of accommodate a bunch of us with sleeping bags and blankets, so we could kind of be all huddled watching a scary movie out in the middle of the woods. I don't even remember what the movie was. I just remember it it being kind of, it wasn't even spooky because the generator's 100 feet away and it's kind of loud. It was hard to hear the movie, kind of deal. The movie ends and we're all kind of milling about. A bunch of the guys up there had their girlfriends up with them, and so a bunch of them are still kind of huddled, and it's like everybody's starting to walk down. You had to kind of walk up to where we were watching the movie down from where we all parked cars and everything. But as soon as that generator turned off, it backfired. And on a cold night, something that loud up a canyon, you might as well have like shot a cannon. It echoed forever. It was super loud, made a bunch of people jump, and some of the girls kind of squeal and all that kind of stuff, because it just sounded like a gun going off. And, everybody's kind of laughing about it or whatever. So me and a couple of the other guys I was with, we just started to kind of walk down to the vehicles. And I remember I was kind of away from the main group, and I was within a couple feet of a couple other people, but, the rest of everybody's, 50 feet behind us or whatever. But way up on the hill. Now, mind you, at the time, this was not something I framed in Bigfoot. That kind of came after. But way up on the hill, and we're already at like probably 6,000-7,000 feet where we're at, and this is probably at least another 1,000 feet higher, further up the canyon where there's no roads, there's nothing up there, just way up. I knew it was up directionally, and this one of those, now that you would associate as kind of like the Ohio Sasquatch yell, just kind of that siren sounding yell.
Mm-hmm.
Super long, like 15 seconds, 20 seconds long, way longer than any person could do. And while it was far away, it was so loud, it almost sounded, I wouldn't say mechanical, but it was just so amplified. Like if it was a person, I don't know, that's not an area where it was coming from, is not an area where people go hike and camp. Certainly not at that time of year. It was coming from the wrong area, right? Where not anybody, it was kind of a different direction than if you kept going up the dirt road to the top of the canyon. But it was way up the slope, and it was just super, super loud. And a few of us that were kind of away from the main body, we heard it, and we didn't know what we were hearing. None of us was like, "Did you hear that Bigfoot?" And there's none of that going on. It was just like, we all kind of stopped, like, what was that? And just the super, super loud, long, that would have been not far from that golf course. The golf course, so Smithville Canyon's like a canyon north of what is called Birch Creek Canyon, and Birch Creek Canyon is what that Birch Creek golf course is kind of named after, right? So it kind of sits at the right before it turns into the foothills to go up the mountain is where that golf course is, and now a bunch of houses. There was nothing up there back then. But that would have been in the same vicinity, and I spent a lot of time up in those hills, and there was definitely times you go up there and totally normal. We were up there riding bikes or dirt bikes or camping or hiking around or whatever, and it was just like cool up in the woods area. And there was other times you'd be up there and you just felt off. like middle of the day kind of situation. Just felt like something's weird, time to turn around, or did you get the willies just for no reason, right? In that kind of that whole vicinity. So that was the one big thing that the first thing that later in life, and what made me realize that had to have been a Sasquatch. I remember when, like, I don't know, years later, probably before you started with Sasquatch Chronicles, maybe 2000, what was that, 2013 or so, so 2009, 2010, somewhere in there, when some of the early stuff, like some of these guys that were putting some stuff online, it was kind of hard to find, not nearly as much YouTube, but that's when there was vocalizations. That was like one of the first times. Not long after that, I heard like the Sierra sounds and everything else, but some of the howls, the Bigfoot howls, when I heard one, I can't remember which recording, I was like, that, like, the hair on the back of my soul stood up, because when I heard that and people were saying, this is a Bigfoot howl.
Right.
It's exactly, that's what I heard. That is
then
exactly
you're going,
what I heard.
holy smokes.
Yeah, now I could put it into a box, right? Now I could categorize it. Before that, it was just a weird, like, it wasn't even, it was eerie, but it wasn't like something that's like, we got to get out of here.
Right.
Because there was like 20 up there, and we were just all casually making our way down to cars.
Well, and thankfully it wasn't like 10 feet away from you, because then you may have been running at that point, right? And what about
running down?
You said a couple years later, near that same area. Can you describe the possible infrasound experience?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's what it is. And again, I only attribute this as a possible explanation because later hearing so many other people's experiences and having some similar ones. So a couple canyons down from this is one of the weirdest canyons on that kind of side of the valley, called Green Canyon. I think part of what makes Green Canyon strange is that half of the year they close that completely off when it snows. They gate it off. So unless you're snowshoeing or you're hiking in the snow or whatever, there's no vehicle access up there. So, you can get up to the top of that thing, and way up at the top of this particular canyon, coming off of a main mountain range or whatever, way up the top, it's where the local university does watershed studies, and they had some stuff kind of sectioned off, had some stuff sectioned off for them to do different studies and everything. And randomly, I was working a job where, I won't get into it just for sake of time, but I was working a job where I was kind of driving around the valley, and I had different crews that were working on some different things around the valley. And the long and short of it was I was playing a little bit of hooky. I'm going to take an early lunch and go on like a little day hike. And I had a little 4-wheel drive work truck. So I drive all the way up to the top, which I couldn't have got up there without 4-wheel drive at the time. I get up to this area where the university does its watershed studies, which is kind of, I guess it's kind of gated, fenced off, not necessarily gated off, but fenced so you can't drive any further. And I hopped the fence and was going to hike up. I wanted to see how far that trail went. And I was probably hiking for like an hour. So I was way, way up there. And I was hiking along at a pretty good clip, just totally enjoying myself. Birds are chirping. It's like 10:30, 11, I don't know. Or I guess it was a little bit later than that. But it was middle of the day, bright, sunny day, not a care in the world, polished off my granola bar, whatever. I might as well have been skipping up this trail. I was just happy I was playing hooky. I wasn't working. And I'm going along, and all of a sudden, Shannon, it was like I hit a wall. Like I hit an absolute invisible wall, to the point like my body stopped. I walked up, and I was moving pretty fast. I wasn't running or anything, but I was going at a pretty fair clip. And when I kind of walked up like that, like I skid for like a foot or two, just absolute paralyzed, stunned. And it kind of, this was after that whole weird shadow thing in my room at the foot of my bed deal. This was a couple years, 3 or 4 years after that. But almost similar in being I was so fearful, and kind of the same thing where I was almost scared to blink. I couldn't see anything. I realized then, and it was kind of one of those things that right before that sensation, I do kind of remember thinking like, man, it got kind of quiet, and like I didn't even finish that thought before it blocked up, right? And you couldn't even hear a bug going by. You could hear way, way off. I know that with infrasound, the reason why I think that there's I know that that's kind of, people are on the fence with that. We know it happens in nature. I don't know if that's what I got hit by, but it wasn't like one of those things where some people say that maybe it's not infrasound, maybe it's shock hitting your system to where you don't hear anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
I could still hear the going, I could still hear way off. Like I could tell that I could hear a plane, like way, way, way off, like an airplane. I just couldn't hear any of the life around me living, right? Like everything clammed up. And at that time of day in the middle of summer, the birds are chirping like mad. You're hearing birds and squirrels and all kinds in the middle of the high, pine forest and all that stuff. And all of the living sounds stopped. I could still hear the water, but there was nothing else that I could hear. And I don't think I was there for maybe more than 10, 15 seconds. It felt like an eternity, but I was scared to even blink my eyes. And I just had a feeling of dread that I was in massive danger. Not even you need to turn around, but something like, you're done kind of a thing, And I don't know what it was. I didn't see it. I can't say for sure it was Bigfoot. I certainly can't say for sure it was infrasound, but it had those characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard other people describe it, and hearing other people describe similar examples, or some of these accounts that people say they, right before they had a fire, just kind of stunned and standing there and kind of twitching, not moving, and all of a sudden a Bigfoot shows up or they see it. That's what I felt like. That feeling described by other people and those things they've seen. That's what I felt like was happening to me. And I immediately 180, and that was the fastest mile run I've ever done in my life, running back. And I dang near crashed driving out of there because it was a very distinctive, like, you're in a world of hurt in about 10 seconds kind of a thing,
Talk about the range of emotions, going from super happy, like you said, you damn near were skipping up the trail. You were so happy to be out there and not working, to just hightailing it out after this feeling of dread.
Yeah, seriously, it's exactly what it was. It was a total. It couldn't have been more extreme opposite ends of the spectrum.
Were you armed at all?
Not a care in the world. No, not at all. I had a water bottle, or not even a water bottle. I had like a little, not like a canteen, like an old kind of a hiking water bottle thing. And that was the only thing I had in my hand. I didn't have anything else. I don't even think I planned to go up as far as I did. And it's cut off. Like the only people that would go up there with there were probably some one-off hikers, but was some of the university people that were going up there to do the watershed studies up there with the snow melt and everything. That canyon there's a weird things that canyon's got a weirder vibe than any other canyons that I've been up in that area. Is all in Green Canyon. There's weird stuff up there. It's just kind of weird. Just feels a little left of center. It's just odd.
I love Utah. Utah is just, if I could drive there every weekend to do research, I would, because there's just so many different subjects that you could hit. And some of them you can hit 5 or 6 subjects by going to one area, right? So that's why I love Utah. And we got about 15 minutes left, so I'll let you choose whether or not you want to talk about the Mogollon Rim and then the footprints that you came across, or if maybe you wanted to share, one of the firsthand sightings from one of your friends or your family. I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Okay, I'll give you probably the craziest thing that I've had from the closest thing that I've had to a sighting. I'll tell that, and then if I got time, I'll do maybe one or two of the friends' accounts or what have you. So I travel a lot for work. I used to travel a ton to Maine. Funny enough, I worked for a company that was based out of Portland, Maine, and I would travel there pretty frequently through kind of unrelated, non-Bigfoot related. I think I mentioned in the email. I kind of became friends with a group of people that are really well affiliated in some of the better known kind of paranormal, reality shows that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And one in that group of friends happens to live out in Portland, Maine. And when I go out there for work, I try to link up with him, we grab dinner together, whatever, hang out. And because he knows the area very well, he's from there. I'd always, we'd always be talking about paranormal stuff and be like, you got to take me to some of the crazy stuff in Maine, This is the land that inspired, Stephen King, and is there some crazy places you could take me around to or whatever. So we kind of had a little bit of a routine because I'd be out there every few weeks and we would try to link up, usually every time or every other time I was out there. Anyways, there was an area near this big lake that he's like, there's a trail that used to be closed off. It's about a mile long on this kind of obscure, back by these little farm properties. It used to be all fenced off. They had it fenced off for 20 years for some reason, but they just reopened it. There's not anybody who really knows about it. But he's like, it's supposed to be really cool. Let's go and check it out. And there's a hidden cove there that we can go and look at. So long story short, we go there. I remember going, during the day, it was really cool. You could tell that it was a path that used to be like maybe an old Jeep trail or something like that. Pretty level. Went through some, kind of heavy northeast kind of New England style woods to this beautiful lake called Sebago Lake. It's huge. Great big lake, very pretty, postcard kind of a lake. Went back to this, it was kind of later in the day, late afternoon, early evening. We're coming back, and I remember it being very distinctive that there was an area about halfway through that trail that they had done some clear cut, that they had been running some small power lines through there that had long since been, defunct or whatever. But I remember walking through that area in the middle of the day and feeling kind of like something's in there, something's strange, something's off. And by this time I was kind of looking at, keeping my eyes out for some stuff that I had started to see. Not a researcher or anything like that, but have been out and found enough stuff with some consistency at that point that it was like something I would be kind of keeping my eyes for and just paying attention to, just my senses and that kind of thing. I just remember I'm walking back with my buddy and I'm like, dude, we got to come back here at night. And we'll go back to the cove. I bet you there's something strange going on. And I had already found some tree structures and stuff right off the trail. You could see that were not man-made things. They were tucked way back in, off the trail, but nobody had even been back there, and they were just weird tree structure stuff. So I just wanted to come check it out further, but I did want the added creep factor of doing it at night.
Right.
So anyway, I was like, let's have some fun with it. And he was kind of new to the Bigfoot thing, but he'd been around plenty of scary environments and everything else. So anyways, we decided to come back later, and this was in like August or September time frame. And I remember that it was during the time that there was like they call it like a flower moon or a blood moon or something like that, right? So we had pretty good light, which made it all the more fun going back there. And what was interesting is that clearing area that I was telling you about, just before that, there was a small, looked like a little family cemetery from way back, like a small, maybe quarter-acre plot that maybe local farmers. That's a pretty common thing when you go to the east, especially the northeast. There's lots of combined family plots, like that's just and they're out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember being in that area. Well, anyways, adjacent, that was on one side of the trail, and way off the other side of the trail where I thought I saw one of those structures, and I had a really powerful little spotlight, handheld spotlight, a small one, but it was powerful. I was like, to my buddy, I was like, let's go off the trail. Let's go look at this other structure that was kind of on the opposite side of the trail. And it was probably 100 yards back in there. And there was this great big kind of crazy structure. I took some nighttime video of it, and it just, can you say a Bigfoot made it? No, because I didn't watch him make it. But it was just really strange. Mother Nature would have a lot of explaining to do if she made it, because there was no rhyme or reason to it. And it was too intricate while also looking like just a bunch of brush. It was too intricate to be not have been like, I don't know how it could have happened naturally. Like it had to have been assembled somehow. We're looking at it, we're talking about it, and pretty soon we start hearing stuff kind of beyond the light, just on the edge of our hearing, kind of sounded like things were running around us. Sounded very bipedal, kind of through the leaves, kind of stuff. And it was enough that we're like, all right, let's start walking back towards the trail. And it died off. We didn't hear anything more. We started going up the trail. This is now we're right about to approach that clear cut area where I just felt something was off. And it was kind of similar to that time up that canyon in the middle of the day where it wasn't where I froze, but I immediately did like an about face while I was walking. And I was like, yeah, that's the nope direction. We got to go back to the car. Like, let's go back. So, and he's like, and my buddy's like, should we run? And I'm like, no, from what I understand, you're not supposed to run And anyways, it was probably, I don't know, a half a mile back to the car. And the whole way we were doing we could hear something on both sides of us, like paralleling us out. And do the whole, we'd stop, you'd hear a couple of more steps. And then we did that enough times. It was almost like it got wise to that, but instead of stopping right when we did, it would keep, like it made more racket, like it was trying to intimidate us out of there.
Right.
Like we definitely were shepherded out. Well, so we get to my rental car that I have for my business trip. And it was like an SUV, and by the time we're getting back to the car, you know, we're getting a little braver. And we're at kind of an end of a road, and where I'm parked, directly behind where we're parked across the little road and backset a little bit is a farmhouse, and behind that's a big barn, and then another 100 yards behind that is a big tree line and some fields on either side. And then to one side, you know, maybe a couple 100 yards away is another farmhouse, kind of a similar setup. And anyways, we're sitting there and like, let's just drop the windows and let's listen, because, you know, we came back here to see if there was something back here, and if, you know, let's experience it. You know, worst case scenario, I'll start the truck and we'll get out of here. So we dropped the windows and we're listening for a while, and we absolutely could hear stuff. It was like, we could hear stuff kind of running around, you know, just kind of running out, just running by. We'd hear sticks and breaking, and every now and again kind of a larger branch break or snap. So we're facing, the way we're parked, we're facing kind of the woods that we just came back from, right? The farmhouse is behind us a ways, and every now and again, you know, I'm looking, and I notice something in my rear view mirror. I'm sitting on the driver's side, and I notice something in the rear view mirror to my left, not the one out on the side of the door. And I'm noticing what at first I thought was fireflies. And I'm looking at it for a second, and then I realized it was like two fireflies, but almost like something turned its head with eye shine, right? So it was like all of a sudden the second eye appeared. And the reason why I knew that it wasn't fireflies was because they were almost staying completely still. If anything, they were kind of shifting a place, and then they started to blink, right? Like you and I blink our eyes. Like blink, blink. And so we're sitting there, and I'm like, to my buddy, I'm like, dude, tell me you're seeing this. I'm like, dude, I was like, I want to see this as long as we can, but, you know, see if you can lean over in front of me and look in the rearview mirror and see if you're seeing the same thing I am. And he did, you know, he kind of leaned over the console and did that whole thing, and he saw the same thing too. And I'm like, can you see it through your rearview mirror? And he said, I can't see it from this angle for whatever reason. So he can sit on my side. We're watching this for a while, right? For a couple minutes. And then what started to happen that was really strange, this is what I remember I called Wes, and I was talking to Wes about this a little bit, and he's heard of this before. But it was like, you know how if somebody's putting in contacts and they blink their eyes to kind of get their eyes focused, or the contacts to kind of sit in their eyes correctly? Like it was kind of blinking its eyes, and as it would do this kind of rapid blink, the eyes would go from the kind of this amber color to red. Almost like it was like controlling it, right? Like it was blinking it on, kind of a deal. And would sit there and would blink, and then would kind of do that rapid blink thing again, and would kind of quickly fade. It wasn't like instantaneous amber to red. It was like amber to kind of pinkish, and then it turned red. And then when it went back to normal, same thing. So we're sitting there watching this happen, and it did it maybe once or twice is all. And then lower down, as in something shorter, I saw another pair of eyes all of a sudden show up and do the blinking thing. And they were smaller in size, and they were a little bit closer together, which, after thinking about it later, suggests to me maybe a juvenile or an adolescent, smaller one, younger one, whatever. But it continued to kind of look back and up at the bigger one. Like you could see it kind of look up.
Oh, that's
like
cool.
A kid would look up, and the same thing. It would try to blink, like it would look up and it would try to blink, and the other one was kind of going back and forth between this eye coloration. And the little one, it was like the little one was trying to do it but couldn't. It would start to blink a little bit, and the eye color would start to change just a little bit, and it would just go back to that kind of the ambery white glow. And then within a couple minutes, an even smaller one, kind of further down, just was there blinking. So we had 3 sets of eyes at different heights and different sizes, kind of blinking in our direction. And we're sitting here watching it. And like I'm at this point, I'm trying to point my phone at the rearview mirror to see if I can get video, and it's way too pixelated.
Yeah.
Couldn't see anything. Plus, at the same time, I'm like, all right, well, I've got this little handheld spotlight, and if I do a fluid motion, maybe if I can whip out the window and look backwards and have that spotlight ready to go, maybe I can zap it just long enough to actually see something. So I'm working myself up to doing that, but also I was a little bit hesitant because I'm like, this is too cool. I'm watching these eyes blink like constantly. So as I'm kind of going through that thought process, way off to my left in my actual peripheral vision, I see a 4th set of, you could tell it was much further away. Like the ones behind us were probably, I don't know, 30 yards maybe. This was probably 150 yards away, this other one. And it wasn't behind me, it was kind of to my left side out the window and slightly to the rear, right? Mm-hmm. But it was like a field, and I could see at that point, because there was a little bit of a moon out, there was a stand of trees, like kind of this one little stand of, I don't know, 12 or 15 jack pines or something, just a dark outline of trees, and this was right in the middle of those trees. And this, you could tell, again, just from perspective of how far that was away, because you could kind of see in the moonlight and some of the little mercury lights from the second farmhouse, that was a ways away, but this thing had to have been much bigger than the ones we were looking at behind us. And that one was one that I could see with my naked eye. I wasn't looking at it through a mirror. And I watched it blink, and it didn't change colors or anything like that, just blink. And it looked like 2 floating, like, tennis balls or something that were kind of, that kind of the ambery white color. And that was one where, so at that point, mind you, we had been watching the other ones for, 10 minutes or so at this point. And I said, I finally told my buddy, I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to light this one up. And I finally kind of had my, my little handheld deal ready. And I did a pretty good job on hitting right in those trees. And right when I hit on those trees, you could tell, well, I didn't see a thing. It's like it just went into the darkness in the middle of the trees, but you could see the branches that were moving back into place. Oh. Like something just literally took a step backwards, just straight backwards into the darkness, and I couldn't see it. But and at that point, then all bets were off, and I'm trying to shine behind us, and we didn't see anything else. And we kind of sat around to see if it would happen again, and we didn't see anything else after that. And we ended up leaving. That's the closest I've had.
Right. No, that's a really cool experience. Don't you think, I mean, I do at least, that whenever there's a juvenile involved, that's when people seem to get escorted out the most. That's when they're hitting people with the infrasound. That's when they're like, you're not coming anywhere near our living room because we got the kiddos here. I wonder if they would have left you guys alone had they not had any kids at the time, any juveniles.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, to me, that area been closed off, it was all fenced off by chain link fence, and it had just reopened, and it was on an area that there's Maine is covered with streams, and there's so many food sources there. And it was an area that there was other areas, like I said, I'd been around that lake, because this was at a time where I was now looking for very consistent things. This kind of ties into some of the stuff that I went out with Rio, the Utah Sasquatch guy, a few times, and from some stuff that he pointed out from people that were far more versed in the subject, like, Roger Krantz and Renee DeHinden and these kind of Bigfoot Godfather types, there was a lot of these, like, get out and see some of these signs for yourself that you can see that there's no way people are making some of these things. And so I had already been out in this area. I'd been traveling to that part of Maine for a year at this point. And so I was pretty well versed in that area, and I knew that there was signs of what looked like very possible activity in that area. So it didn't surprise me at all. But I tend to agree with you totally. Like, however they move around, however they kind of squat at night, if they've got their sentries or they've got people kind of keeping guard, that kids are running free, whatever. But if you're getting too close for comfort, that's not the only time I've been escorted out of an area. It just was unique that we had the eye shine situation.
That is a cool experience.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I love that. Well, Mike, if you would be willing to come back on a second time with me at some point in the near future, I would love, because I know that we don't have time to get to the rest of this stuff today, but I would love to hear the rest of your stories and, of course, your family and friends' firsthand encounters. I always love those. So if you'd be willing to, I'd love to hop back on with you another day.
Yeah, let's do it for sure. I've got some pretty cool ones that are firsthand from friends and family that I think are pretty unique and are kind of a good listen. So I'd definitely be happy to do that. You just let me know. Talk again. That could be a teaser for some cool stories that I've got.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And it's been a long time coming to talk to you. I wanted to say thank you also before we hop off. You've been supportive of me ever since I was on Sasquatch Chronicles, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet. You're doing an awesome job. Big fan. Keep it up, and love your work. You're doing great, Shannon. A great voice in this community, so I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you. Okay, well, I will. I'll be in touch soon, and we'll do part 2.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little fire. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. poem, The Four Quartets, where he says, when you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.